This presentation rests on the research and writings of Barron, Dufour, Hord, and Wenger and Snyder. To review what we determined as important in our last meeting, I will go through some of our drawn conclusions. First, we think teachers, we, are our most untapped resource. We also agree that students have that potential, but we need some teacher leadership before we can begin to tap into student leadership. We would love to give students the opportunity to learn C5W skills before they graduate. Additionally, we are disappointed in the fact that collaboration does not happen as much as it should. Finally, we acknowledge the value of reflection and would like to provide time for teachers to verbally process and reflect on their practices regularly. After summarizing our last meeting and looking at next steps, we should define what kind of group practice we would like to embody. That is today's goal. We will take a look at 3 leadership frameworks that will foster collaborative learning and increase climate health at our school. You will have an opportunity to reflect on how each framework will contribute or will not contribute to our goals. As a group, we will come to a consensus about which framework best supports our mission to improve some component of our school for the good of our students and for the good of our climate health. I wanted to provide background on teacher collaboration. In the 1980s, education was moving away from what Shirley Hord described as egg crate schools. What she meant by this was that teachers typically worked in classrooms with no communication with other adults. Teachers in the 80s were starting to scratch the surface of professional collaboration, and schools made significant efforts to allow this to happen. The teachers in those professional communities were able to work on managerial issues. Accomplishing these tasks collaboratively led to a more organized and in sync feeling among staff. These meetings evolved as teachers shared successes and failures with each other, and then districts began to see the value in encouraging teachers to collaborate. There are 3 main leadership frameworks that we will look at today. The first being community of practice, or COP. When it comes to defining COPs, I cannot say it better than Etienne Wenger and William Snyder did in 2000. They defined COPs as groups of people informally bound together by shared expertise and passion for a joint enterprise. Time and again, Wenger and Snyder observed COPs enact change in organizations, drive strategy, and start new lines of business. Unfortunately, COPs are way more prevalent in corporate businesses than in education. With the COP structure, small numbers of passionate people in a larger organization can energize a community, solve problems quickly, and transfer best practices, which the teaching profession desperately needs. Take a moment to reflect about how this framework supports our goals. Also feel free to reflect upon how this framework may or may not support one or more of our goals. The next framework is known as a professional learning community, or PLC. Despite the overuse of this acronym as a flippant reference to obligatory meetings, a true PLC is a valuable way to collaborate with teachers of similar content. Conversations revolve around best practices, and PLCs center around continually analyzing data and student and teacher progress. PLCs can address intervention strategies for struggling learners and address ways to engage and extend those students who tend to learn things in one iteration. A huge perk of PLCs is that learning is incremental, ongoing, and job embedded. Student achievement increases due to teacher growth. Again, let's take time to reflect on how this framework supports or fails to support any of our goals. An interesting perspective from Daniel Barron in 2007 describes the framework called Critical Friends Group, or CFG. Since CFG results in members teaching and learning together, this framework hinges upon having willing participants. According to Barron, these critical friends must be willing to be reflective, make practices public, frame meaningful questions, ask for feedback from colleagues, hold one another accountable for meeting students' needs, ask the kinds of questions that provoke and challenge their own assumptions, and believe that together they are better than apart. Teachers in CFGs identify the gap between who they are and who they want to be. Teachers can work explicitly together to fill that gap and grow together for the good of their students and their school climate. Although this is the most emotionally risky form of collaboration, sometimes only tension breeds change. This framework has the potential to generate sustainable reform and leadership in an institution. At this time, please again reflect upon how this framework supports or does not support our goals. The next slides detail my own reflections on how the frameworks support our goals. Our goals are supported by COP in several ways. This framework has the potential to enact change even if we have a small group of people at first. Even if our meeting numbers reach nowhere near majority of the staff, the ripple effects we will have on our immediate colleagues has the potential to inspire enough change for us to observe it nearly system-wide. This will be made possible through collaborative efforts to develop skills and transfer best practices. We can continue the ripple effects by showing colleagues that our research-based strategies are reaching our students. This framework will also preserve enough autonomy while also allowing us to hold ourselves accountable to the principal. Operating as a PLC will contribute differently to our goals, but has extreme value as a leadership framework. We would see increased student achievement because teachers would grow more confident and be more effective. This framework would also support our own development in teaching C5W skills explicitly to students. We could share ideas and maintain consistency in implementation. Ultimately, this framework would increase collaboration at our school, which we all agree we want and need. Critical Friends Group aligns to our goals in many ways. We will foster individual teacher growth. There will be an informal group of teachers that holds each other accountable for change and improvement. There might not be as an effective result if we formalize a group. The CFG would provoke in-depth conversations among teachers, but also have that happen in a safe environment where everybody understands the norms and we're able to provoke each other and we're able to have conversations that help us grow. It allows an open door policy to observe and discuss lessons or tasks, and it will allow freedom for a wider range of discussion topics. So we were going to discuss these three frameworks, but we were going to reflect first. So the first thing I want is that everyone reflects in writing which frameworks you think would work for us. What will maximize our effectiveness as a group? Keep our goals in mind as you do this. We're going to share verbally what we wrote without responding and without changing what we wrote. And then after we take all that in, we will discuss what will work best for us and we'll reach a consensus, hopefully, about what framework we will adopt. So when we eventually did the reflection and discussion with my team, we came up with the fact that 4 out of 4 or 100% of us realized that a PLC framework is probably not going to work for us. We all work in PLCs with our content, and we see this sort of as a bigger opportunity than a PLC would provide because we do want to enact change in our school. 25% of us, one of us, chose just the CFG framework without adding anything else in. And then 3 out of 4 of us described the need for a CFG framework, but also liked some mixture of COPs. So because of that, we failed to reach a full consensus of either CFG or COP. We ran out of time and we failed to find a time for all of us to meet again before the assignment due date. The group liked the definition of a COP, which we can intertwine easily into any other framework. And after reflecting on the meeting and the discussion, I think we're going to go with the CFG. We need that open door conversation. We need those thought-provoking questions to be asked. And I think a lot of us are willing to sort of be open in that. And we're also just going to throw, I think, some attributes of a COP in with our critical friends group.